The Lutron accessory switch might seem boring on the surface, but it solves a problem with smart switches that if you haven't hit it already, you will soon. My name is Eric Welander. Welcome back to my channel, all about building an effective Apple smart home. If you're not already familiar, there are three types of switch circuits in a home. A single pole is where one switch is controlling a group of lights. Three-way is two switches controlling a group of lights, and four-way is more than two switches controlling a group of lights. All smart switches and dimmers work with single pole circuits, and a growing number of smart switches support three-way, sometimes with only one smart switch in the circuit. But there are few to no options for four-way smart switches until now. Lutron previously dealt with three and four-way setups by having you close off the wires in certain switch boxes and use a Pico remote in those locations instead. Aside from, of course, a few wired three-way switches, but we'll get to that later. With the Pico remotes, then you effectively had a single pole setup with the switch combined with a bunch of smart remotes in the wall. These remotes work fine, but it's nice to have a fully wired solution that isn't always reliant on remotes and a Lutron hub. So at CES this year, Lutron announced a new accessory switch for their Claro Switch and Diva dimmer. This switch hardwires to either the switch or the dimmer, but not Lutron's original switches or dimmers. And you can actually add up to 10 accessory switches to a single Diva dimmer or Claro switch. That's a lot of lighting control. Since these switches operate as accessories off of the switch or dimmer, they also don't raise the device count on a Lutron Cassetta bridge, which is currently limited to 75. It's also important to note that this accessory switch doesn't require a white neutral wire for setups like mine, where I connected it with a Diva dimmer. Now, a quick side note, I know Lutron already has some Cassetta switches that work with wired three-way setup, but either way, it wasn't always as easy as using Pico remotes. I think the goal with the accessory switch is to get the best of both worlds. And thanks so much to Lutron for sending me this accessory switch and dimmer to check out with no strings attached. These opinions are my own. In the box, you get the switch, wire nuts, and wire diagrams. And a side note with the Diva dimmer they sent me, I really don't like the clear plastic packaging Lutron uses for some versions of their switches they sell in hardware stores. It makes it easier to see, but this kind of packaging is always a pain to open. Installing this accessory switch is just as straightforward as any three-way or four-way switch. This means it's not as easy as a single pole, but the switch doesn't make anything more complicated than it needs to be. As always, study Lutron's clear wire diagrams in the manuals in the box, and plan some padding of time around your installation in case things go wrong or just take longer. And take pictures of the wires and label them before you take them off the original switches. This helps for reference if you need to put things back how they were. You can alternatively hire an electrician to install this, and then you can add it to your smart home. When I was installing, I hit a challenge that you might have too. When I reviewed the Diva dimmer and Claro switch, I mentioned that it's a shame that Lutron made them slightly thicker than the original versions. This accessory switch is the same thickness too. On my one switch box, I have a conduit pipe coming in right next to where I need to put my switch in the box. This makes for a tight fit to also get the switch in the box without smushing up against the conduit. After some finessing, my switch sticks out just a little bit more than my original Lutron dimmer in the same box on the other side. The Lutron switch plates do a good job of minimizing the appearance of these. It still doesn't look all that great. On the other end of my three-way circuit I tested this on, the mounting plate on the accessory switch is ever so slightly taller than the original style Lutron dimmer it was replacing. This meant I needed to shave off just a little bit more drywall off the bottom to get it to fit nicely. If you have a home with older electrical work, you might have some of these quirks and features that just take a little trial and error to get everything lined up. It's not rocket science. You just need to not let these kinds of challenges throw you into a panic. This is also true with just about any home upgrade or renovation in my experience though. It can be lots of fun, but you just have to go into it with the right mindset. During CES week, I had a chat over Zoom with Scott from Lutron, and I got a clear impression from that meeting that the Pico remotes are not going away and are still a key part of the Lutron Caseta line. These accessory switches are an additional product and not meant to replace Pico remotes. Now, if you're debating about an accessory switch versus a Pico remote for your switch upgrade, there are a few things to consider. One key feature of a Pico remote is that it still has the ability to dim the light with the middle buttons. An accessory switch is just that, a switch. If you have it paired with the Diva dimmer, only the Diva dimmer slider can fully adjust the light brightness outside of doing it in your smart home. Lutron has not left you completely in the dark on this one. The accessory switch paddle behaves exactly like the paddle on the dimmer itself. This means if you have the dimmer slider on the Diva dimmer set to a specific value, then the first press of an accessory switch or dimmer paddle moves the lights to that value. If you press the top of the paddle again, it turns the lights to 100% brightness. If your brightness slider is already at 100%, then the first press just turns the lights to 100%. On the other hand, if you have older electrical work in your home and switch boxes that might not have room for these accessory switches, then the Pico remote is probably still a better choice outside of the one dimmer or switch you need to make everything smart. You can also pick up Pico remotes and pair them with either of these circuits and use them as wireless remotes or mount them on the wall. I have a Pico remote for my workbench lights mounted on the wall in my garage, and you would have trouble guessing that it's not a real light switch. This can be a great way to add physical controls for lights without having to cut up drywall and run wires. In general, I think an accessory switch is the better choice in most cases for putting switches in your box. It's hardwired, so it can work like a normalist switch, even if your Lutron bridge is gone. And it has much better tactile feedback than a Pico remote, in my opinion. Lutron continues to be my first and default choice for smart switches. This accessory switch is a nice upgrade, and it adds support for 4-way circuits, which is hard to find in any smart switches these days, especially with a dimmer. Another thing to note here is that it's not entirely clear if or when Lutron will support Matter. They're on the board of the group behind Matter, which shows some commitment, and we can guess they'll add compatibility over their Caseta wireless bridge, but nothing is confirmed on that at this point. But on the other hand, Caseta already supports all the major smart home ecosystems, so it's not that much of a pressing need on my end to have them support Matter, but I do think it's important to see them do so for the long term. So let me know in the comments below, are you planning or have you already added one of these new accessory switches to your smart home? Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Links to all the products mentioned can be found in the description. Subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.